5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Chairman, and to your colleagues. Thanks to all of you for giving so much to our country. As you know, our fiscal year, our meaning the federal government's fiscal year, begins October 1. We're in the process of putting together a budget. If we pass a budget, we meaning Congress passes a budget that increases spending by, let's say, 10%, roughly $650 billion, what will be the impact on inflation?
So if it's, it depends on, of course, if it were funded by tax increases or other spending cuts, I guess in your hypothetical, it's not. It's so I think deficit spending at the margin stimulates the economy at the margin. It's a big economy, though.
And what will be the impact on inflation?
It would probably be a small effect on inflation ultimately, but there would be an effect through stimulation of the economy. It would be more demand, which would, just in general, I'm not commenting on.
I know.
I'm sort of commenting on fiscal policy here, but nonetheless, there would be an effect on inflation.
I'm just asking you about basic economics.
Yeah.
I just read a piece by one of your economists from the San Francisco Fed, Mr. Shapiro, who's arguing that labor costs have virtually nothing to do with service inflation and a negligible is a negligible factor in broader inflation. And I read this stuff from some of your people, and I just wonder what planet they parachuted in from. If Congress passes a budget, in my prior example, that reduces spending by 10%, roughly $650 billion, what impact will that have on inflation?
So that would, you'd have less stimulus for demand, and you'd be cutting programs if you did that, and therefore you'd be slowing the economy down, and the impact would be less demand. Neither of these ideas affects the supply side at all. So less demand would mean less economic activity, less spending, and that would have a negative effect on inflation. Well,
more stimulus by federal spending is inflationary. Is that right?
It has so we've been in this situation where inflation was so stable for 25 years, you remember, and almost nothing that we did mattered for inflation. And it's called the so-called flat Phillips curve, where there just wasn't a connection between how tight the economy is and inflation. That does not appear to be the case right now. I think many people would say that the Phillips curve is now not so flat, and that there is an interaction between.
So that's a yes.
I think that's a yes. Yeah, it's
okay.
This is economics,
And less spending by government it means less stimulus, which tends to be disinflationary. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you about the Basel III end game. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
There's been some reporting, and of course, not every country has to follow the Basel recommendations. The European Union is not following. They're going their own way, and we're kind of going our own way in America, using the Basel directives as a guidepost. But it's been reported that the Fed's going to raise capital requirements by as much as 20%. Or, excuse me, it's going to raise capital requirements to 20%. Is that right?
No, the idea would be to raise them by 20%. In other words, if 20% of whatever current capital requirements are, you would raise it by 20% of the total existing amount.
Okay.
So
if J.P. Morgan's capital requirement right now is, let's say 13%, it would go to 15%?
Right, something like that. If that were to be what happens.
And This will be for banks $100 billion or more?
No. There isn't a final proposal. So, and I know it's still in motion. I know things are still changing.
Yeah,
so.
but you folks are talking
I've been
about
briefed
it,
on
and
it.
you're going to have a lot of input.
No, that's right. So, but I will say, sorry, what was it? Your question was?
Are you going to raise capital requirements for 20% to banks $100 billion or more? Or are you going to affect community banks as well? Smaller
No,
banks?
the capital requirements will be very, very skewed to the 8 largest banks, the GSIBs. There may be some capital increases for the other banks, and there won't. I think none of this should affect banks under $100 billion.
The really big banks you're talking about?
Yes.
Are they the ones that are at risk right now?
They weren't. They were a source of strength in a place of strength.
They're doing
the
pretty
recent
well.
Turmoil. Yeah.
We've gone from too big to fail to we're damn happy they're big. I mean, haven't we?
Well, I would say that, as I mentioned, we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort raising the capital standards 10 years ago and more recently, and I supported all of that and was happy to do so. And I think
Senator Kennedy's time's expired. Senator Smith of Minnesota.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy, as you always do, on schedule, on time.